5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and it seems like this is just the season for mainstream YouTubers to post bad faith video takes about Godzilla. As recently, Dr. Skipper and Nerdstalgic have caused a lot of G-fans to reassess their stance on gatekeeping. I mean, if you haven't seen these things, well, first of all, the Dr. Skipper video is an endurance test, but they've spawned so many different responses. People breaking down why their respective videos just don't understand the basic franchise. They're either making giant assumptions, saying things that are just blatantly false, or they're ignoring things. And I know some of you have been waiting for me to do a proper response rather than the little comedy video I did initially. And, you know, I've decided I do want to do a response, but it's not necessarily in the way you might think. Although I will get the stuff you're probably hoping to hear out of the way first. For starters, let us look at the primary argument that both of these videos put forward, which, despite being of vastly different lengths, vastly different editing quality, and vastly different tones, somehow they still come to the same conclusion, which is that of the many films, like the nearly 40 films if you round up, in the Godzilla franchise that have spanned 7 decades, only 2 or 3 of them are apparently worth watching. And I say 2 or 3 because Dr. Skipper seems to have forgotten that Shin Godzilla exists despite including footage from it in his video. And those 3 films, including Shin Godzilla, also include the original Gojira and Godzilla -1. So, of the 3 films they consider worth watching, only one of them is older than 10 years. So this argument reeks as much of presentism as it does of just plain ignorance. Now, why only those 3? Well, because those are the movies that are about something, you see. They are apparently the only Godzilla movies in the entire 70-year span that have any substance to them at all. And the rest of those movies, especially the monsterverse ones, apparently have no substance whatsoever and are just disposable, escapist entertainment for the unwashed masses. That's the undercurrent. How blatant they are in saying it, well, that varies, but it's still the sentiment that's being put forward. That the only 3 Godzilla movies that are worth watching are the ones that are about something, and it's only those 3. Now, obviously, more than only 3 Godzilla movies have messages to them. When I did the How Political is Godzilla video, I estimated that roughly a quarter of the overall filmography has a socio-political message to it. Not the same message, obviously, it varies from film to film, but only a quarter of the movies, which leaves 3/4 that are more in the vein of entertainment just for entertainment's sake, it's true, but that's a quarter out of, like I said, almost 40 movies at this point. That's way more than just 3. Of course, the number also shrinks when you move from the movies to the greater franchise and you incorporate the games and the comics and the cartoons and whatnot, and you see that not all of those have messages either. Some of them still do, but the majority of them do not. Still, more than just 3, and quite a few of them are from the earlier days of the Showa period. So, like I said, patently false statement. But I actually think there's something else worth discussing here. Something that actually got on my nerves way more than the other inaccuracies. Well, the only other thing that kind of got on my nerves was how Dr. Skipper misrepresented the Lucky Dragon incident. But, you know, I feel like that's a subject for a completely different video on its own. There's something else, though. Something that I feel really needs addressing because It's something I keep seeing in the world of discussing cinema and art in general, and to be perfectly honest with you, I am sick of it. So again, to recap, the primary argument here is that 2 or 3 Godzilla movies out of all those 7 decades are the only ones worth watching because they have meaning, and the other movies, especially the ones made in America, have no meaning and are therefore disposable and not worth it, and just cheap cash grabs, and let's all throw rocks at them. That is the sentiment being put forward here. But what's the subtext? Well, it seems to me that what's being said here is that the only good art out there is art that has deeper substance, art that has something to say. It's basically a variation of the all media is political argument that people have been pushing over these last 10 years. And of course, if the only good art is art that has meaning, art that has a message, that means any art that has no meaning and doesn't have a message is therefore not worthwhile. And I could not disagree with that idea any more than I already do. Let me put it this way. Suppose we take the argument at face value for a moment, that only Gojira, Shin Godzilla, and Godzilla -1 are worth watching because they have meaning, and the other stuff, particularly the monsterverse, is just mindless escapism with no deeper meaning to it at all, that's just there to be flashy spectacle and entertainment for entertainment's sake. Just for a moment, let's assume that's true. Here's my question. So what? And that's not a reductive question. I actually am posing it seriously. So what? Why is that a bad thing? Why is escapism frowned upon? That's what I think is really at stake here. What we're seeing is that people are taking these movies and basically using them as a way to basically wage war on escapism, because they're diminishing the value of the stuff that might just be there for you to have fun while watching. And I just cannot abide that. Look, don't get the wrong idea about me. I like movies that have deeper meaning. I have got many, many videos spread across the 10 years, 11 now actually, that I've been running this channel that attest to that. And I like picking meaning out of movies, even if that means I have to sort of put it together on my own and say, well, if you look at it sideways and squint, maybe it could be about this. You can see that for yourself. But the thing is, I also like escapism. Escapism, I actually think, is a vital part of entertainment, because that's a large part of why entertainment even exists. It exists so that people can get away from their daily lives, get away from the constant back and forth on news media, from the grind of their work days, from the troubles that they might be having, and they can just take any amount of time they want and either read a book, watch an episode of a TV show, watch a full movie, play a game, and just unwind, have fun doing it. Again, I ask, what exactly is wrong with that? Because the arguments that are being presented here are essentially saying there is something wrong with it. That these movies that exist to be a fun time at the movies and not make you think about things, that those have no value at all and maybe shouldn't even exist. But that's just missing the beauty of entertainment itself. Yes, entertainment can be a useful vehicle for conveying a point about something. I am not saying otherwise. But it can also just be a way to just kick back and see something maybe you haven't seen before, or hear something you haven't heard before that isn't necessarily going to profoundly change your way of thinking, but it's interesting. Again, like 3/4 of the Godzilla movies that exist in total are devoted to this. And those, my friends, those are the reason Godzilla even has a 70-year legacy. Had it just been that original movie, well, it might still have been considered a good film in its own right, But would Godzilla necessarily be the icon that we know him as today? That's doubtful. And if every one of those movies that came after that first movie was exactly the same as the first movie, dark and dour and trying to push meaning onto you, it wouldn't have lasted 7 decades because it would have fizzled out very quickly, because there would have been monotony to it. There wouldn't have been any variety. People wouldn't have kept going to those movies because they wouldn't have had fun going to them. And you know, Toho is not opposed to still making Godzilla content that has fun either. People keep putting all of the pressure on the monsterverse by saying, oh, Godzilla's turned pink and Kong's got a gauntlet now, and that's just clearly meant to be ridiculous Bayformers nonsense. Toho would never do something like that. Hey, what's this animated Godzilla vs. Megalon short online? Well, we'll just pretend it doesn't exist because that completely destroys the point. And there you have it right there. Even Toho is still indulging in the escapism. And again, I don't see how that's a problem. But you know, there's something else missing from this particular conversation. Everyone's been focusing on Godzilla in all of this. But let's not forget that the next movie is not just a Godzilla film, it's also a King Kong film, which means it's carrying the legacy of King Kong as well. Let's think back to that original movie for a moment. That first 1933 film that introduced the world to the eighth wonder. Now, King Kong is considered one of the greatest movies of all time. Even the stuffiest, uptight film snobs who think that fantasy is for losers and people who don't understand what real art is will usually make an exception for King Kong. And most of the time they will also say that the reason they're making that exception is for stuff like how innovative it was, both artistically and technologically. How there's the meta text of Marion C. Cooper inserting aspects of his life into the character of Carl Denham. How it takes all these different thematic elements from great art throughout the ages and brings them all together into one cohesive vision. Things like that, of course. But let us also not forget that original King Kong movie, the one that set the standard for giant monster movies, the one that revolutionized the film industry, the one that became the must-see movie of 1933, despite the fact that there was a depression going on and most people couldn't afford to go to the movies anyway, that was an escapist film. It is a work of escapism. That's not to say it's got nothing beneath the surface, of course. There are still plenty of thematic elements, but the primary reason it exists is to just entertain. The themes are there if you want to look for them. They are just sort of waiting to be discovered, but they're not obtrusive. Most people, the first time they sit down to watch King Kong, they're not even looking for that stuff. They're just allowing themselves to be transported aboard the venture to this lost world that's unlike anything else they've ever seen before, with creatures unlike anything they've ever seen before. And that's why it succeeded. That's why it endures. If you look at the original movie, you'll actually see it doesn't really have anything in the way of socio-political commentary that's contemporary to current events of that era. It doesn't say anything about the rise of fascism in Europe or the rise of socialism in Russia or the stock market crash that's got everybody in a financial bind. The closest thing we get to the mentioning of the Great Depression is that when we first see Anne Darrow, she is clearly destitute and starving and desperate enough to try stealing an apple. And that's it. People of the era certainly would have seen that and recognized her as someone who got hit hard by the crash and can't find work anymore. Of course, you could also just say maybe she's a vagrant or maybe she's down on her luck for some reason. Because again, the movie never mentions the crash. It never mentions the Depression. If this was your only window into 1933, you would think that it was depicting a world where there was no depression at all. And that was the point. That's why people saw it. They went there to get away from the Depression, so they could just be transported somewhere else. The only reason that element is even there for Anne's character is to show why she jumps on board Carl Denham's crazy invitation to go halfway around the world and shoot a movie she knows nothing about. It's a motivation. She needs the work. But that is it. There's nothing else to be said about who's responsible for the destitute state that the city is in, or anything like that. Because there isn't any need for it. That's not what the movie is about. The movie is instead about this adventure, about the theme of Beauty and the Beast, which isn't really political in itself. That's what makes this movie a piece of great escapism. I repeat, King Kong is considered one of the greatest movies ever made, and its legacy is being carried by the new empire just as much as Godzilla's legacy is. So technically, there is a legacy of escapism that leads up to this movie. And I ask again, why is that a problem? And of course, on top of that is the idea that there has to be a choice. The way it's being presented is like the people saying this are saying, you have to choose for your entertainment to either be meaningful or be spectacle. And one of those answers is right. You better pick the right one that I'm telling you to pick. When in fact, you don't need to pick. There is absolutely nothing preventing anyone from enjoying both kinds of entertainment at the same time. And in fact, I would encourage people to enjoy both at the same time. There is a place for art that has meaning, and there is a place for art that's just fun. And there's no reason why either one should be degraded. Well, let me put it this way. They both still have to be good. I will make that very clear. All this stuff I've been saying in defense of escapism is not meant to be an excuse for escapism to just do whatever it wants and not even try to be good. Obviously, there still has to be quality there, but that quality doesn't necessarily hinge on its ability to say something. Likewise, it is more than possible for a piece of media that does say something to suck. I'm looking at you, Godzilla Polygon Trilogy. You clearly were saying quite a few things because you loved hearing yourself say it as much as you could, and nobody likes those movies. So quality is still required, but there is no reason that you cannot have both kinds of entertainment. Obviously, if you go all in with escapism and you never do anything that has meaning, you're probably going to miss some really profound ideas. You're going to miss opportunities to think. At the same time, if you engage only with stuff that has meaning all the time without any breaks, you're going to be miserable. You gotta have both of them. And you can have both of them. That's the whole reason that Godzilla -1 and Godzilla Kong the New Empire exist at the same time. Because they can. Because there is nothing that's preventing them from it. And nothing preventing people from enjoying them both. For different reasons, sure, but still, they can both be enjoyed by the same people. You don't have to choose. You don't have to eschew one and embrace the other just because someone's telling you to. So that harkens back to that other video I made where I said I'm probably not going to be comparing the New Empire to -1 at all because it's clearly aiming for something totally different. It's trying to be a fun time at the movies. And that's how I'm going to approach it. If I have a fun time watching it and it's got some quality to it, then that's what's going to matter. If it has something profound to say somewhere mixed in, that's just a bonus at that point. If it's spectacle and it's hollow and it really doesn't land at any point, well then we have a problem. But none of us have seen it yet. So we don't know what that's going to be like. The point is that just because something is escapist does not mean it is inferior. And in fact, it might be just what the world needs. So that's where I ultimately land. All of this stuff that's been going around recently feels like it's trying to be a bunch of elitist snobbery that is degrading to escapism. And I just cannot abide by that. Hence why I've said what I said. But hey, maybe I'm the only person who does believe that. Even if that is the case, I'm going to stand by it until my dying day because, heck, I like being entertained. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.